Hello, and welcome to the full public presentations for the US 401 corridor study. The presentations consist of a general overview for the US 401 corridor study. And in the process, before we begin, I'd like to thank Campo staff, WSP, the US 401 corridor study team, and other members such as the core technical team, stakeholder oversight team, and interested participants in this study. Largely, this is a presentation summary that consists of what has occurred in terms of updates associated with the project. This is the fourth of 5 rounds of public engagement, and the important recommendation we want to really stress is that there will be improvements to existing US 401 and existing area roads. Those will be prioritized for short and midterm implementation before a long-term recommendation for new roadways such as US 401 would be considered. Our agenda basically consists of the project recap, looking at existing 401 in Wake County and Harnett County, as well as possible alignment to using NC 55, Andrew Bypass, and NC 210. We'll also be looking at the future long-term US 401 alignment recommendation and discuss next steps. For existing US 401, we want to improve safety and review access management in the area, implement complete street guides to improve bike ped and transit mobility in the area, and improve intersections at various locations. And with fast-growing Harnett County, we wanted to address the regional connectivity that it provides, improve safety around railroad crossings, particularly in the Kipling area, and prepare the corridor for future growth. As you can see, there are a lot of projects already planned in the general area for US 401 area, from Hilltop Road relocation all the way to widening US or NC 210 to 4 lanes. We also take into account future Fuquay-Varina Eastern Parkway and the Western Andrew Bypass. And the questions that have been posed, of course, were based on the analysis. Is this the right set of projects? Are there other improvements to be recommended? And how should those be prioritized? Next, we wanted to take into account future US 401 and how it exists in the 2050 MTP is in the northern section, of course, there's a new access point and alignment just south of Banks Road, and it would, of course, travel along the eastern and southern edges of Fuquay-Varina with crossings at NC 42 and NC 55, terminating at US 1 at the Wake Harnett County line with a potential extension to Piney Grove Rawls Road. One of the things that we needed to note is we had to take into account traffic dispersion in the area, and it is expected that a future road would facilitate traffic flow from the southern and eastern portions of Wake County, Harnett County, and Fuquay-Varina into Garner and Raleigh, as well as other parts of western Wake County, all the way up to Research Triangle Park. And one of the objectives noted, based on the analysis, which included modeling and public feedback, is we need to refine that alignment for a future US 401 that could be applicable to the 2055 MTP or Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which will be under development in the near future. Let's look at recommendations for existing US 401 in Wake County, as shown on the green by the green line. We broke it up into 5 segments, from Banks Road to NC 55, NC 55 to Judd Parkway, Judd Parkway to Ennis Street, Ennis Street to Judd Parkway in the southwestern portion of the city, and then from Judd Parkway southwest into Harnett County. We have various facets where we look to widen the northern portion from 4 to 6 lanes, all the way to Judd Parkway southwest of Harnett County, where we widen to 2 to 4 lanes. Each and every one of these features includes improvements that include bicycle and pedestrian accommodations or we address bicycle and pedestrian accommodations in a specific way. And as a separate map, we've included locations where we incorporate multi-use paths for bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. We'd also want to widen sidewalks or multi-use paths through downtown, or if that could not be applied, implement parallel bike improvements. We also want to address transit in this process. We want to strengthen connections between Fuquay Marina to Garner and Raleigh, with a possible connection to Holly Springs and Apex in light of the growth that is occurring in that part of the county. For Harnett County, again, there's along the existing US 401, we wanted to address some improvements in light of the growth in traffic that is occurring due to the growth in developments in Harnett County. Currently, the Harnett US 401 in Harnett County exists as a two-lane facility at 55 miles an hour. The goal is to utilize the existing US 401 alignment based on public input and widen to 4 lanes at 45 miles an hour. We have two applicable cross sections where they would be widened from 2 to 4 lanes. In each and every one of the phases, we do have multi-use paths to address bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. And where you have less right-of-way at 120 feet, there are things that would need to be done to address railroad and other sensitive resources. Whereas when it's 150 feet, you want to maximize the extent in which the roadway is useful for all forms of traffic. Along with improvements along US 401 in Harnett County, we wanted to address bicycle and pedestrian facilities in parallel to US 401 in light of the growth that's occurring, particularly in Northwest Harnett County. We also wanted to include bicycle facilities along collector and local streets between Rawls Church Road and Harnett Central Road as development occurs. As mentioned earlier, in light of the growth that's occurring, we want to do improvements, particularly at various intersections with US 401 in Harnett County to signalize the intersection, restrict turns, possibly close the connection, and reevaluate traffic impacts at various intersections. We also wanted to redesign the railroad crossings along US 401 and other roadways to accommodate that future widening that's anticipated due to the growth, with specific improvements at or near Matthews Road, Lafayette School Road, Calibut Road on the northern and southern ends. Now for future US 401, we wanted to just go back and just remind people of what has occurred in the earlier phases of the study. We looked at 3 initial sections as broken out from US 401 to the north down to NC 42, then from NC 42 to NC 55, and ultimately from NC 55 to US 401. And based on a lot of feedback with the initial public engagements that had occurred, the desire was to look at potential alignments further to the east with the viability of making improvements to the existing US 401. And based on that input, as of March 16th, 2023, the desire was to ultimately look at 3 specific alignments. They were called W, X, and Z. The W alignment consists of looking at existing US 401 and existing NC 55 with improvements, and of course a connection to the Andrew bypass down to 210. The X alignment looks at a modification of the current alignment in the MTP that connects US 401 at Banks Road to US 401 south at Piney Grove, Rawls, Piney Grove, Wilburn Road, as well as a Z alignment that goes strictly from US 401 at Banks Road and ties in with the Andrew bypass at NC 55 in southern Wake County, near the Wake County, Harnett County border, that ultimately connects with NC 210 into Lillington. And the recommendations are shown here, and as mentioned before, the widening of US 401 would be from 4 to 6 lanes, widen NC 55 from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, and then continuing to connect with the Andrew bypass with the widening of NC 210. Ultimately, one of the decisions that was determined to be made if for a new alignment, and was recommended was a hybrid, which would consist of combining alternative X and alternative Z. So the alternative X on the eastern section and the alternative on the Z in the southern section would be combined into one alternative, still connecting with Andrew bypass and smoothing out of the connection involving the alternative Z section and the Andrew bypass. As you can see below, to your lower left, we have the cross section of this XZ alignment, which would consist of 4 lanes, median divided, with multi-use paths on both sides. We noted in light of this decision or recommendation, there are many benefits to having this alternative, as well as challenges regarding alternative XZ. We note its connection to Andrew bypass and using 210 as proposed to accommodate future US 401. It would enhance existing travel patterns between Lillington and Banks Road. You could still have the connection as far as the Southern Parkway would be downgraded to a collector road, while the challenges include acquiring new right-of-way and how it impacts various properties in the general area. So ultimately, from the beginning now to this point, we have established what would be a recommended future US 401 alignment. It is much different than the current alignment that's in the MTP, where it is 1 to 1.5 miles east of the existing MTP alignment and terminates at NC 55, whereas the MTP alignment is further north and west, with a connection, of course, to existing US 401 south near the Wake-Harnett County line. So at this time, we're wanting to get feedback on that recommendation. Again, still stressing that this is in the planning phase, and also acknowledging that we desire improvements to existing roadways, improve existing facilities, build the other facilities in short and medium priority, with ultimately this alternative XZ being a long-term, and again, a long-term priority. And again, as we want to stress with regard to this, we note that recommended projects for existing 401 and prioritizing other roadway and intersection improvements in the area. And as you can see, what we desire is improvements along US 401, as well as NC 55, with consideration and noting that there is construction being done for the Andrew bypass, and have these projects built in a sooner fashion, and then have as a later project a future US 401. The next steps that we have in this process is you. We want you to review these recommendations as we move to the final phase. And what we will ensure is that the Campo Executive Board will consider endorsement of these stated recommendations in the future. And we want to encourage that the MPO, NCDOT, and local jurisdictions work to program the recommended short and midterm projects in their next planning and development phases. Wish to thank you for this opportunity. Just want to remind you, as shown on the earlier slide, the public engagement phase of this process began on October 3rd and will continue to November 5th. Please go to the website at us401corridorstudy.com for the website for website information, as well as the toolkit. And please take the survey because your feedback is valuable. Again, thank you so much for your participation in this exercise. We look forward to hearing from you all with questions and comments, and appreciate your feedback. At the end, thank you so much for your participation.